Well, Barbara, you can call us to order.
I think I'll do that. It's 2 minutes after 7. And I'm calling the Ethics Committee for the year 2022 to order. And thank you all for showing up. I hope we don't have to meet a long time and a lot of time, but we're available and we know how to do it, thanks to our advice that we get. So it says we should introduce each other, but
Sure.
would you like to do that before we?
Beth, do you want to start off?
Yes, ma'am.
Beth Pope, I'm newly elected to the RTM and to this committee. I live in Darien, I've lived here for 22 years. Looking forward to working with all of you.
I'm Jan Raymond. I've lived here forever. I grew up here and went to all the public schools, which Barbara worked at so long. And I've served on the Board of Education. This is my second round on the RTM. I don't know. I chaired the Darien Housing Authority. So I'm very familiar with the issues in Darien.
Been around a while, yes.
Well, I did move away for a while.
But you couldn't stay away.
I came back, yeah.
Welcome.
And you're in District 4.
District.
And Beth, you're
I'm
in?
District 5.
Okay. Jim Cameron, also District 4. 32 years living in town. Been on the Board of Ethics for 10. Been on RTM for 21 years. And I've served on almost all the committees with the exception of Education, Parks and Rec, and Finance.
Fine.
And it's great to be, back with the Board of Ethics again and see it with some new members as well too. Barbara.
Okay. I've been in town almost 50 years, 30 of them at the high school. That was a pretty good run.
That was a pretty good round.
Yeah, and I've still been involved in stuff. So, this is a good place for me.
And I'm Curtis Butler. I've lived in Darien since 2013, been a member of the RTM ever since, and just recently moved to District 5, so now I'm in District 5. But I've been on Education and Parks and Rec the entire time.
I'm Wayne Fox, I'm town attorney,
How long have you been town attorney for Darien, Wayne?
about 22 years.
Yeah,
Okay. He knows the lay of the land as well too.
yes indeed. So, we needed to elect a chair.
I'd like to nominate Jim Cameron.
Second that?
Are there any more nominations for chairman? So let's have a vote. Shall we do it by acclaim or raising our hands? And let's say, all in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Yes, aye.
Thank you very much
You got it.
for that
Now, do you want to
active
take
faith.
immediately?
I will be glad to take over. I have
Okay.
organized some material to work from during the meeting as well too. We have a copy of the agenda.
Here, you know what, this, so you can copy it.
The first item that we need to deal with is approval of the minutes of the last meeting, which I attached here as well too. The last meeting was Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021, and it was an organizational meeting. And as you can see, everybody was present, officers were elected, and the meeting lasted all of 10 minutes. And we never met again the rest of last year. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 23rd, 2021 meeting?
I don't think we can vote.
Only those present can vote. yeah.
I think, is that true, Wayne, or people who were,
I wasn't at the meeting, so
We're not
I
at the
have to
meeting?
abstain.
Technically, that would be correct. I mean,
Okay.
you can't verify what went on or confirm it. I guess you can raise no objection to it.
so there were only two of us who were at that meeting, Barbara, you and I
Yeah.
guess, right?
3.
Three, you were there, Curtis? Excellent, okay.
Yeah,
Did I get a motion to approve? I think I did. A second?
second.
Great. All those in favor? Approved. Great.
Did it.
We also need to nominate a vice chair and a secretary. Are there any nominations for vice chair for the Board of Ethics?
I'll nominate Barbara.
I would second that. Any other nominations for vice chair?
Thank you.
Hearing none, may I have all those in favor raise their hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
All right, we can do this.
And we need a secretary. Not a heavy lifting job for this particular board.
I wonder if Jan would be a good one for that.
No,
Nope, okay.
thank
All
you.
right, all right.
Thank you, Barbara.
So we're down to Beth or Curtis. Would either one of you be interested in being secretary?
Well, let's call it clerk.
Clerk, all it really involves is taking minutes and filing the minutes in a timely basis with the town clerk.
Yeah.
I'll
Beth.
nominate Beth because she's got a pad in front of her.
She's already taking notes. She's halfway home. That was
Thank
your
you, Beth.
mistake, Beth.
Thank you.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Beth.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay.
And let it be noted that backup are the other two folks in this room.
Of course.
Not most of our meetings, but this meeting in particular is being recorded for TV 79. This is one of our few public meetings, and you can always go to the videotape if you have any question as to what transpired at the meeting. So the biggest thing I think we wanted to do this evening was to get Wayne Fox Town Council to talk us through the existing Board of Ethics duties and responsibilities as they relate to the town code of ethics, and how we accept complaints, how we process complaints, because I think that a lot of people don't even know that there is a Board of Ethics, given that much of our work is done in executive session and never really reaches the light of day. So this discussion will be a primer for those members of the public that have always been curious as to what the Board of Ethics is. Wayne, can you walk us through what the responsibilities of this board are?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Secondly, I would say that our code is fairly simple. It is found in section 2-301 through 2-310, and it is simple in purpose. I think one of the things that has surprised the board and myself on occasion is that in many instances there have been cases where a complaint of sorts has been filed, but the alleged action really did not have anything to do with the code or one's obligation with the code.
There's a copy of the code.
I have a motion, okay. And so for that reason, we met, we agreed, or the board agreed on what it was or was not, dismissed the case and moved on. And one can say, you, the town, the board should be happy in the sense that we have not had many complaints. There's a lot of talk, as there should be, about revising the form, revising the code, looking at what the towns have done, all of which I think is very good. But first of all, we got to take a hard look at what is here. And I think if you go to those sections, I thought section 2-302 was very concise, very well drafted, and very clear. We want to, or the board wants to be sure that all affairs and actions of the town are always conducted at high standards, with favoritism or conflict of interest or all of the criminal laws taken.
Can I ask you to speak up just a little bit? I'm deaf in one ear.
Paragraph 1 talks in terms of seeing to it that all affairs of the town are done in an appropriate and fair manner. It goes on to state that for all those who serve the town in any capacity, engage or may engage in business with the town, what is acceptable and what is not. And thirdly, which I think is as important, they want to ensure the orderly procedures for receipt and consideration of complaints, questions, and problems of the ethics of specific conditions or of the actions that are taken or are contemplated. So it's very simple and concise as to what we're here for, what we're doing. We don't want anyone to get any special favors. We don't want anyone to take any special favors or gifts of any kind. We want to be sure that it's fair and honest and appropriate. That's what we're talking about. The code then goes on to state in some more detail what else is expected of the citizens and those who serve it. No office holder shall directly or indirectly disclose information that would benefit him financially or other private interests of himself. Then in section 2-304, it talks about gifts and favors. No officer wishes to accept a favor, nor should any officer give a favor. No office holder or employee shall, in the discharge of his duties, grant any preferential treatment. And no officer or employee shall request or permit use of any town-owned vehicles for his benefit. So they want to be sure that we all are not getting anything or giving anything in particular in return for the job that we're doing. And that's a particular type of action, a particular act that they consider to be inappropriate and subject to penalty. There's also a provision dealing with 2-305, talking about the conflict of interest relating to business with the town. If you are affiliated with an organization that is doing business with the town, you should not engage in that discussion, you should not be part of it. You should indicate why you think it's still fair for you to vote on it if you think it is, and at the same time not be in conflict. So you don't get anything, you don't give anything, and you don't have any conflict of interest in terms of what the town is doing and with whom the town is dealing. And that's a pretty narrow scope in terms of what we consider to be a potential problem for an employee or a public official. That's pretty much what we deal with. Other issues which we've talked about in the past, I was trying to think of some of them today, Jim, we had dealt with. In the recent past, we must have had 2 or 3 of those that simply did not apply, did not come within our definition. That's the first thing the board will look at. Is this something that we should be considering? Is this an issue for this board? And if not, what are we going to do about it? I think there will be some talk about expanding it and looking at what other towns are doing. Prior to coming here this evening, I was looking over some of the samples, and some of them are fairly broad in terms of what is inappropriate. Also, much broader in terms of what the penalties may be. There may be fines, there may be censures, there may be removed from the board. They can be quite serious. Some I saw fines of up to $2,000, which is a pretty significant penalty. We don't have that. I think in our case, we look upon it more as if one is found to have been in conflict with our rules, there's more the shame that is brought on someone that can lead to them correct themselves or serving as an example to other people. The other thing that this board has been very sensitive to is that we also don't want this board to be misused to attempt to bring poor publicity on someone who has not been guilty of it. We would not want anyone filing a claim against someone right before election day, as an example, to bring attention to some negative aspect of their serving the town. That's why we are very careful initially to take a look at what the facts are, making determinations to whether or not there's reasonable cause to believe there's been a violation. And then if there hasn't been, we don't disclose anything until we get to that step and make that determination. I think that's fair to the system. I think it's fair to the people that might come before your board.
So what's the process through which a resident in town would file a complaint?
The resident in town knows, for example, that Johnny Jones and his business got a contract, which he exercised his influence to get the contract. There's evidence that Johnny Jones was given a gift by a department or by a contractor or somebody that needed to get a job, or was given certain benefits because he was a member of the board, the RTM, or the Board of Finance, or the Board of Selectmen, or another board. So I think one has to look at what was allegedly done. One has to gather some information as to what occurred.
Well, I want to back up just one more step. More specifically, how does a citizen start the process going? They have to go to the town clerk.
Go to the town clerk. There are forms that are on file that can be reviewed, can be executed, and given to the town clerk. The town clerk will then assign it to the ethics board, and they will start the investigation.
And strict confidentiality is assumed.
Initially, yes.
Right, and that's the important thing, because from the moment that the complaint is handed over to us, as soon as we start to meet, we go into executive session, which means that we're doing our diligence to see if the complaint has merit, to then go into further public discussion of that complaint. But I
Once
think
we get over that hurdle.
Right, but I think it's really important for all of us as members of the board to realize that once we see that complaint and we bring it into executive session, we can't talk about it to anybody, spouses, children, neighbors, anybody. It has to be conducted in a privileged way. I was saying to Wayne earlier today that, you know, this kind of rubs against my freedom of information predilection that everything should be open and transparent. But as Wayne's pointing out, this is really to protect the innocent.
And the process.
And the process is going to be robust, but until we've decided that there's anything that is of merit to then take that next step, it has to be, done behind closed doors. And that's why 99% of the work of the Board of Ethics never gets known. Nobody knows about it outside of the members of the board itself.
How do we make a determination? How do we gather information that leads us to a conclusion?
Next question, go ahead.
I think we would have the right to request people to come before us, or we have the right to subpoena people if we need to come before us and give testimony as to what they know about it.
Subpoena?
We have
Yep.
that, we have that power.
We have done that in the past,
We have, yeah.
yes.
I expect that's not normal. It's not typical.
It's not frequent.
It's not frequent,
No.
no.
Most people, I think, I can't go into the specifics of the cases, but most people, especially the complainant, is more than willing to come and talk to us. And then we can also talk to the person that the complaint is filed against. And I believe the wording says that the accused, so I'll put that in air quotes for the moment, the accused also has a right to face the complainant
They do
in that closed door process.
have that heard out, yes, that's
Right.
correct.
Right.
But I can only think, Jim, of one case in the last roughly 20 years where that power of issuing a subpoena, calling people to come in and testify, has occurred.
Right.
I can't think of more than one.
I can't either.
So I'm saying,
Was it
isn't that good news?
Was it related to schools?
I'm sorry?
Was it related to schools?
No, I think it
That was a
was,
different one, okay. That was- Erase
I'll tell you later, Barbara. I'll jog your memory what it was.
Erase it. right.
Yeah, no, I'll jog your memory what it was.
Jim, I think the last 2 or 3 were probably incidents where someone filed a complaint, and then we looked at it and realized it has nothing to do with what we are supposed to be investigating.
Right,
Right.
right.
It's not critical if somebody does it, but it shows that we look upon it very seriously to see if it is something that should be brought before us. Or you
And
folks-
I cannot think of anything in the last 10 years that has gone beyond the closed door process. I cannot think of a complaint that has actually gone into the public aspect of then hearing the same information, evidence, cross-examination, et cetera, that's done behind closed doors, because that closed door process is just step one. If we find that there is cause and we have jurisdiction, then we go into a public setting, and then we go through the whole process again. We bring in the complainant and we bring in the accused, and we go through that entire process in a very public fashion. But until this body has determined that there is merit to the complaint and that we have jurisdiction in a violation of the town code of ethics, it all stays behind closed doors.
That's why I think you folks, at some point in time, will have to make the determination as to whether or not you feel the actions that we deal inappropriate are acceptable, or whether you want to go beyond that and broaden that in some way.
And I want to talk a little bit about that as well too, but yes, Jan, go ahead.
While we're in here, can we bring, or can a person bring an ethics complaint against a group of people who are engaged in an activity that they have questions about? A group of people who are together and taking an action that is deemed by the complainant as unethical.
Let me say this, I think it could be more than one person.
Yes, that's what I
It could
mean.
be 2 or 3 people that were engaged in a scheme of some kind, for example. If you're suggesting, could you bring an action against the RTM, or could you bring an action against the Board
No,
of
I'm
Education or the
thinking
Board
of
of
just a
Finance?
few people.
I think if it was more than one person engaged in the same activity or similar activity, which resulted in in someone's opinion, that they violated our code, you could address it to more than one person, I think.
All right, so now, my next question is there a period of time during which one needs to file that complaint?
There is no specific statute of limitations,
That's what I was asking.
so I think it would have to be considered to be reasonable. If you wanted to file a complaint against someone for something they did 10 years ago.
Right.
I mean, in terms of reasonableness and a reasonable standard, I would think that's a little too far apart, too far distant in the
Yeah,
past.
I would too.
I would assume they still have to be serving for it to have any merit. They're no longer sitting.
For them to have, I think for it to have a
Government.
value, I think it would
Yes.
have to be, someone that's still sitting,
Yeah.
Or employed.
or employed, of course.
And then the question, what is the feedback loop when this, as you said, typically is determined that it has no merit with respect to the obligations of via the Code of Ethics? How do you
We-
respond to the complainant?
What we've done in the past is basically communicate with that person in writing that we received their complaint, we met with them on dates X, Y, and Z. We have heard their complaint, we have studied the facts of the case, and at a meeting on date Z, the Board of Ethics decided it was not a violation of the Town Code of Ethics and that the case would not move forward.
And I have found everyone that we've dealt with has been very reasonable and understanding as to why we did what we did. Maybe had a misunderstanding in their own mind of what the jurisdiction was. Because as I recall the more recent ones, Jim, my recollection is that they weren't even close. I mean, there was really no connection between what the concern was, not questioning the integrity of the person that filed it, but looking at our definitions, looking at our code, the alleged activity was really totally unrelated to what we have on paper.
So it's what you're saying is it's outside of the jurisdiction of this board.
Exactly.
So that's the first determination. Does this board have jurisdiction?
Correct.
Then, if it's determined that we have jurisdiction and it falls within, the town code,
Sure.
then we would assess the merits of the complaint.
Correct.
So those are like two steps, the process. We wouldn't really address the merits of the complaint until we asserted we have
No,
jurisdiction. There could be meritorious complaints over which we don't have jurisdiction.
Clearly could be, and that has happened on occasion.
Okay, so, and we're clear, I guess, in the past, when we, on the grounds upon which we decline
Yes.
to,
In those instances that I can recall, it was very clear that what the allegations were had nothing to do with the code. You may not have liked it, but there was nothing that even appeared to violate the code.
so yeah, we
So it looks to me as though much of this code and much of the, and I went over it before I came. And it looks to me like most of it is financial.
It is.
And so
I think
do
it's
we have
correct.
any jurisdiction over behavior that is maybe unethical but is not financial?
If you are doing something that benefits you, which it shouldn't be, or you are using your power to try to influence someone else inappropriately, I guess those could all, in a broad sense, be looked upon as financial. If you're looking at a violation, if someone was rude or crude or
Oh, no.
disrupted a meeting or something of that nature, that would not be a violation of our code of conduct or our code
No.
of ethics.
And how do we, as a town of Darien with the Code of Ethics, relate to the state and what their,
Under the state statute, we are entitled to and have the authority to develop this body. So we are authorized to conduct business and be in place and in existence through the state statute. But we then control it the way we deem appropriate.
okay.
Which is to, advise you to be careful about reading other codes of ethics.
Yes.
Especially, for example, there is a state ethics board which offers an online training course, which I took today, just for curiosity's sake, because I discovered that Stanford's Board of Ethics requires its members to pass that online training program before they can serve on the Board of Ethics. But the state's Code of Ethics is different than that of ours. And I want to get to the question you're raising, which is unethical behavior, which is not necessarily in violation of our Code of Ethics in one sec. But one other thing that we are entitled to offer, and I don't think anybody has ever come to us requesting it, is an advisory opinion. In other words, somebody could come to us and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I'm concerned if this might be a potential conflict of interest or a violation of the Code of Ethics. Would you please evaluate what I'm proposing and how that meets the Code of Ethics? Give me, in effect, permission to do that. before somebody files a complaint against me because I didn't ask. Is that a fair way of
That's fair.
explaining it?
And actually, on the state level, that is done on a very regular basis. As an example, my wife was a teacher, and I was in the legislature. I got an opinion from the Ethics Board as to whether or not it would be appropriate for me to vote on the benefits for a teacher. And they said it was because that person was not getting any benefit different from everyone else in that class. You get a request for opinions all the time at the state level. No reason we can't do that, we have the authority to do so.
But this again assumes that people know that the Board of Ethics exists, that there's a complaint form and an advisory opinion form that could be readily found on the town website. I mean, these are things that I want to undertake ASAP with the town clerk, who is also enthusiastic about trying to make us a little more visible. Not because I want to get more complaints in,
Right.
but I also want to educate people as to what we are, what we do, and what the guidelines that we adjudicate against are. So there'll be fewer complaints out of frustration and more people who go, well, I didn't like the outcome of that, but you know, it doesn't really meet the code of ethics of the town, so the Board of Ethics is probably not going to be able to
Or I know
assist me.
this guy or gal is a scoundrel. I know they're
Yeah.
coming up for election. I want to do everything I can to beat them. So I'm going to file a complaint with the Ethics Board.
But we're not really an ethics board, we're a conflict of interest board, it seems, when I read the code.
We are a conflict, the basic concept of our code is conflict of interest. Yes, that's accurate.
Yeah.
It seems to me that, once again, that appears to be financial, the conflict of interest. And I'm concerned that there may be other things that are not financial, but have questionable ethical soundness. So we can't bring anything like that to the Board of Ethics.
Well, I'll give you an example, because I actually researched a couple of real-life cases from neighboring towns, which shall remain nameless, and how their Board of Ethics adjudicated on the case. Because their code of ethics is a little different than ours. It goes beyond just financial conflict of interest. A senior elected official sent a letter on town stationery with his name and title to all town residents, giving his endorsement to candidates in an upcoming election. That was brought up to the Board of Ethics, and the Board of Ethics found that to be a violation of the board's, or the town code of ethics.
So, can you just repeat that?
Sure.
Scenario?
A senior elected official
like
sent
the
a letter.
First selectman.
Been on for
I
over.
won't say
Oh,
what it
what-
was.
what-
No, I can say what it was. It was the first selectman of New Canaan.
Okay,
It's a
that's
matter
fine.
of public record.
Yes.
The first selectman of New Canaan, apparently, from what I've read on the town website in New Canaan, sent a letter to all town residents, including newcomers, like welcome to New Canaan, with his name and title on it, basically saying, support the members of XYZ party in the upcoming election.
Wow.
And the Board of
Misuse of
Ethics, Board of
Town
Ethics
stationery.
got him on using town stationery, even though the printing was paid for by the party and the postage was paid for by the party.
Brown paper
But,
bag.
I mean, just on a visceral level, that kind of smacks to me as, that's wrong. Now, it's not a financial conflict of interest, so if that were to happen in Darien, would our code of ethics cover something like that? Or are there other aspects of the town charter that might admonish or discourage somebody from doing that?
Well, it talks in terms of, as an example, with respect to gifts.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about, accept directly or indirectly, any favor, service, or gift of substantive value. Is that of substantive value? Could be considered as such.
But also, we,
Well, I think that's a bit of, I think it's completely unethical.
Agreed.
But I think it would be unethical if, beyond just the stationery, I think given the fact that this person is supposed to be serving the entire town of New Canaan, and then,
How about this one? No office holder or employee shall request or permit the use of town-owned vehicles, okay, equipment,
Mhm.
materials,
Right.
or property for personal convenience except when such are equally available to the public generally. You might be able to fit something into that provision.
That's kind of like catching Al Capone on not paying his taxes, though. It's-
Yeah.
But that's, like, it just, I mean, I get it, the stationary and the use of the vehicles and so forth, but separate and apart from that, that's just a campaign. That's just a one elected official of whatever party endorsing candidates of his or her party. That's not
But-
unethical.
But doing
Using
it
town
with-
resources to do it is.
Using the
but doing it with
stationary,
the town
perhaps.
stationary and
Yeah.
his,
Having the town pay for the stamps, I'm guessing.
well, even
No, I
if
think
the
it
party
would,
paid for the
yeah, so I'm
stamps.
just, I mean, I have to, but I'm getting a little, I mean, these are all hypothetical, but,
Well, that's a
because that
real-
would be like,
that's a
yeah.
real-
Yeah, I don't see
Well, I don't
how
think
that's
there's any-
unethical for someone, you know, for Selectman Klein to endorse, you know, her slate of candidates, or for
Right.
Monica McNally to endorse hers. That's not unethical, that's,
No,
Using,
It's politics.
using the public office to do so.
yes, I think that's the objectionable part.
Using her title, perhaps, as influence instead of her name. I don't know. Could be
using her
interesting.
title, her name, all right, well, I mean,
It's not
But
our
it's- we
case,
don't-
so.
right, it's not our case,
We don't
I don't know,
have to
that that's an
worry about
ethics
that.
violation. I get the stationary if, you know, they took the town
Yeah.
car and put
We don't have to worry
campaign
about it
signs
for a
all
while.
over it.
No, much more
But
ethical.
that doesn't necessarily, well, in my opinion,
You shouldn't give anybody ideas.
I think I'm worried more like, does this apply to a little gang of people who decide they're gonna have a sit-down strike somewhere, or they're gonna, do something?
No, I wouldn't see that.
You
no.
might not like what they're doing.
Well, that's the point, of the fact that you don't like what they're doing doesn't mean they violated the code.
Exactly, but they could have
And
something.
the other thing to think about is, when you folks do the review of this and what other towns are doing, we can put together that information for you. But there's another extreme to it, and one of the samples I saw, it calls for each, I think it's each employee, all public officials and such public employees as the chief elected official of the municipality or special district shall designate, shall file with the municipality under penalty of false statement, a statement of financial municipal interest. So we have to, each person would have to file a financial documentation outlining their financial interest before they could serve on the board. And if they
That's a
didn't do
terrible
that,
idea.
on the RTM, on the Board of Ed, on the
elected or
whatever.
appointed official, whatever it might be. That's the other extreme, in my opinion.
I think you're
The
right.
state has a similar provision.
No, but you said municipal interest, it's not filing all of your finances, it's just your,
It's what they call a statement of financial interest for any calendar year in which the official or employee serves in an office or position on or before the following May 1st. So it's I'm not sure what's included, and I wouldn't include your financial, I don't think include your tax returns. They talk about
That's crazy.
no, what I heard was financial interest, which is related to the
I have
town.
teachers, the town pays my salary, come on,
yeah.
don't give up on it.
And we don't want to have a chilling effect on people
No.
willing to serve,
No.
especially in unpaid positions as well, too.
Well,
But
that's true too.
here's another one. I came up with this one myself, okay? A town employee is found to be having a relationship with a subordinate who reports to him. Although openly a couple, they are not married. Ethical? Unethical?
Not relevant to this body.
Consensual? Well, not relevant to our existing code of ethics, because it's not a financial conflict of interest, but there might be something under town
Depends
employment
on benefits.
that would prevent somebody from,
There may be a town policy that prohibits it.
right,
But that's for town HR, not for the Board of
Yeah, I think,
Ethics.
Right.
yeah,
Certainly
I
not
would say
the way we
that.
have it phrased now, that's
Yeah.
correct.
right,
I would
exactly.
agree.
Another one, I had a creative
You
affidavit.
were being
Can I say?
creative, weren't you? Goodness.
A town resident sees a Darien police officer out of uniform, on his own time, wearing a hat with a political statement on it. Ethical? Unethical?
First Amendment.
That's,
Mhm.
doesn't
Yeah,
fall
I
within our,
Certainly not under our
No.
No.
jurisdiction,
No.
whatever the hat, whatever the color of the hat might be or what the logo is.
Well, it wasn't part of his uniform, therefore.
But he's
Well, no, he was out of uniform, he's on his own
Okay,
time,
that's the point, yeah.
on his own time.
Wouldn't even matter if you were in his uniform to
Well, I
this
would-
body.
That's right, right. I would
That's
agree.
right.
I
The
agree.
chief might have a say on it, but,
Exactly.
you know, again, I think we want to, you know, recognize the First Amendment, that this individual who happens to be a police officer on his own time is certainly entitled to his own freedom of speech and attire, but the complainant probably sees this as an indication of bias on his part or her part, and it might affect his or her ability to do their responsibilities as a
I think
police
that's
officer.
Really far-fetched.
I do too.
That would be my guess for us.
It wouldn't be for us to deal with, I don't
Yeah.
think.
I
No.
agree.
If in fact he was in uniform and wearing such a, even an offensive hat,
Yeah,
which would commonly be accepted as offensive to the general public, I think that would be more a case for him to complain to the chief in terms of what their policies and procedures are,
Right.
rather than the ethics
Right.
board.
but I do remind everybody that this Board of Ethics has jurisdiction over all town employees, not just members of the RTM, not just elected officials, but also appointed officials, employees of the Board of Education, Public Works, et cetera, et cetera. And I cannot think of a case that has ever come up before this board in the years I've been on it, that was a town employee per se, but that's not to say that it might not.
Either.
How many complaints do come in a typical year?
I think that in a typical year, probably none.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's one, I think that's a lot. And in that sense, we may want to change it all we wish, or all you wish. But in some ways, you think, oh, are we lucky that we haven't had more?
I think we are.
It says a lot about the town and the folks that serve it, and the town folks that work here.
I would agree with you, but I think there's also the argument that could be made that there haven't been more complaints because people don't know that the Board of Ethics exists, or how to file a complaint,
Or they don't understand what it does.
or what it does, more importantly, and,
And in a small town, I would
What it
assume
doesn't.
confidentiality.
I'm sorry?
That's-
If I were a person with a complaint on my mind, I would not assume confidentiality in a small town.
I think you're right.
I think you're right. They
Yeah,
probably-
fear of reprisal would prevent me from doing it.
Although the process of filing a complaint does require you to identify yourself. And there is an advisory at the bottom of the page. This is the second last page in the handout I gave you. The undersigned is aware, that's me, the complainant, is aware that releasing the information contained in this application to any third party, including the press, is a violation of section 182, da-da-da. The Board of Ethics will inform you if and when and if this information has been released. I declare under the penalties of false statement in this application that the above statements are true and correct, and that I am the applicant named above. So that's a declaration on their part that they have to identify who they are, that they believe that what they're saying is true, and that would not be a defense against malice, is that correct? Because you have to prove malice? or-
Yes.
Yeah.
I was reading minutes from previous, they're not all available.
You found them.
Some of them, but I remember some past minutes, you would probably know since you had the longevity on, that actually allowed for complaints to be filed anonymously. I remember specifically reading that, or that it was something that was discussed by this board
It
sometime.
had to do with freedom of information.
I tend to think I would.
You don't remember that?
I don't remember that one, no.
You remember what year that was?
I don't, maybe 2017, but I'd have to go home and check my notes. But I just, as you're discussing the anonymity issue, it came to my mind that in some previous year, I don't think the minutes go back that far, so I'll find it
If you
again.
happen to come across it, I would like to.
Sure.
I would enjoy seeing it.
Sure. Is there actually, besides online, a place where the, annual reports, to the extent they exist, or past, documentation of how complaints were handled and correspondence
Town clerk's
resides?
Yeah, just
So it's in the town clerk's office?
Yeah, if you go to the town clerk's office, she has a file and she can show you as she was sending some stuff to me this morning, going back to 2009, she could show you everything that's there.
And so she has, it's
She
there.
has it all. Now, I have spoken with her and told her that this board probably is interested in redesigning its web page presence on the town website to include more information about who the members are, what the code of ethics is, a link to that, a link to the, as I sent to you, our responsibilities, a link to the complaint form as well too, because I went looking for the complaint form online today and forget about it, I couldn't find it at all. But going back to the anonymous complaints, it is possible, correct me if I'm wrong, Wayne, it is possible to file a blight complaint anonymously.
I believe that's correct on that ordinance, yeah.
And again, the Blight Review Board, similar to us, does not disclose the addresses or names of the people against whom complaints have been filed. They have taken to showing pictures of the properties.
So you know
And,
immediately who it is.
well, I don't know if you know who it is, but you can look at the picture.
Yeah.
This was a TV 79 issue that I raised because I thought it'd be useful to have people see what a picture of a blighted property looks like, so people would know what it was and what it wasn't. Similar to what I think we should probably do in terms of disclosing who we are, what we do, how we handle things. And to that point, then when we put up the contact information for the members of this body, if people call you and say, I think I've got a blight complaint here, I wouldn't opine on behalf of the board. I would explain what the process is to file a complaint, and you might want to look at this link here, and you might want to look at the code of ethics, etc. So I wouldn't discourage anybody from, oh, that doesn't have any merit at all, or, yeah, bring it on. We've been looking for a case for the past year to deal with. But I think it's important that we, and I think this should be true of the RTM as well too, I think the members of the boards and commissions should have contact information available so that interested citizens can find them. And that's very hit and miss on the website. Some boards have them, some boards don't even list who their members are.
But just to confirm, nothing that advances beyond our closed sessions becomes public, right? So someone files a complaint, we don't find any merit, their name is never released,
That's correct.
ever.
It's in a file at the town clerk's office.
Okay.
I think you will find, in looking at minutes, if you can locate them,
Some, yeah. Mhm.
you will find that they may seem very vague because in most instances, it never gets beyond that point.
Right, but they
So
don't redact
we don't
them.
disclose anyone's
Right.
name or the minutes don't reflect.
Oh,
it.
sure.
A lot of minutes just say the
There was a
board was
meeting.
called to order at 10:33 a.m. on such and such a date and went into executive session.
Right.
And the body removed itself from executive session at 10:75,
You see that all
10:55 or
the time on
something.
the Board of Ed agendas.
Yes, right. And similarly, what they're doing behind closed doors, as other boards do, if it's discussing personnel matters or real estate issues or
Litigation.
union litigation, things like that, contract negotiations, is best kept in a closed session for all the reasons that you could assume. Other questions or concerns that people have, because we have to move on to our
Or
other meeting
other
shortly.
things that are on the meeting.
Is it okay for this board to meet virtually if necessary?
Yes.
Wayne?
Yes, there is a statute that was made part of the law by the governor. It was
Good.
about last May or thereabouts. I can get it for you, which will allow you to do it under certain circumstances.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you, Wayne, and maybe you want to read this, the Board of Ethics is not technically part of the RTM, as I read it. It is its own entity,
Made
most
up
of
of
whose
members.
members are made up of RTM members.
They all are,
They all are.
Is that
Okay.
by statute or?
by code.
Oh,
By code, yeah.
I didn't see that.
So I'm going to suggest that we bring the Board of Ethics out from underneath the RTM umbrella and put it along with other boards, commissions, et cetera, on the town website, so it has some standing. I think Krista is up for that as well.
I don't
too.
think that there's any reason that you can't do that. I
Mhm.
think that what I might do is let the moderator know that you're doing
Mhm.
it, maybe bring it before the Rules Committee.
Yep,
That's a good point.
yep,
Just to let those folks know what you're doing.
yep.
what and why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good reason.
Yeah.
The membership is typically determined within the RTA.
It is, all five.
Yes,
They
So-
they even say when you're elected at the first original organizational meeting.
right.
So can we technically claim it's separate?
It's a separate board. You are not controlled by the RTM. You, by rule of law, consist of members of the RTM. So you're not a branch of the RTM. You can have your own rules, you can have your own procedures, your own processes. You're not violating anything by acting separately. You don't need the permission of the RTM to meet tonight. You don't need the permission of the RTM to investigate Johnny Jones, or whatever it may be. So you have that separate power.
And I believe members can also just be electors. There was some wording in there that if your term is up on the RTM, you can
You can
stay on the
stay
Board
for
of
the
Ethics.
rest of your term,
As
yes.
long as you are an elector
Yes.
in town.
Kind of like a member of the RTM moving, but still staying in town.
Right.
You can still serve
Jimmy
that district
district.
until that time is up.
Got it. Any other thoughts? What I would like to do is circle back with Wayne and look at some of the other town codes of ethics. See if there's anything in there that we find attractive. Krista did dig up a conversation by the Board of Ethics in 2009, at which time I was on as a member. I am embarrassed to say I don't remember this, but there was some work and some thought given to revising the Code of Ethics then, but it was part of the charter revision effort that was happening in town. The charter revision went down to defeat, and with it, I think, may have gone whatever efforts were put into revising the Code of Ethics. But I'd like to do that research, share that information with all of you, and then get back together again at some time,
Okay.
maybe before the new year,
Maybe
because
it's
I'd like to
in
move this along. You
Maybe
know,
it's in Jan's file.
maybe it's in Jan's file. You don't have the two.
I think I was on.
But I'd like to keep this thing moving along, because we've, talked about doing this many, many times, and I think it's time to breathe life into the Board of Ethics. Again, not to get more work for us, but to better explain what it is we do and what we don't do, so that people will bring complaints, but with some legitimacy to them, as opposed to
Okay.
gripes and complaints, etc.
You'll be out 3 nights a week doing investigations. You don't know why you're
Yeah,
doing this.
exactly.
Careful, that sounds
I
terrible.
don't want to wish that on
You
anybody.
didn't know there was that much corruption.
We don't want corruption.
If there is no other comments, questions, ideas, I'd like to thank Town Council for joining us this evening. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.